Johan Ackerman is no stranger to change, but when he walked into Loftus, he found a team in turmoil. The Bulls have been in 3 finals, but they had no title, and the coach has just been forced out the door. In his own quiet way, he said about changing things, changing the culture, and in this interview, we talked to him about how far those changes have gone, how far down the road the Bulls are to where he wants them to be. And we also talk about bringing in his own coaches, the furor around the Springbok coaches that he brought in to assist. And we also talk about the top 8 permutations. Who would have thought the Bulls would be in a running for a home quarterfinal? The timestamps are on the screen here if you want to jump ahead. So let's get to it.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
Welcome to this special exclusive interview with Johan Ackerman, coach of the Bulls, and looking forward to this after spending a week with the Bulls at Loftus. And Johan, I wanted to thank you personally again for that. It was probably the highlight of my life. My wife won't like me hearing say that, but it came pretty damn close. Thank you for that once again.
No, it's a pleasure. Hi, Emvia and Harry, and thanks for being on your program. Yeah, no, it was a pleasure to have you there at Vodacom Bulls, and thank you for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed it, but was just a little glimpse of what we do. But yeah, we'll probably talk a bit more about it.
Yeah, just one burning question, Johan. Did Emvia behave himself? I mean, I don't know. We have some stories from Loftus that he was all over the place doing crazy things.
No, he was really good there. He was a pleasure, like I said, to have. He was really keeping himself behind the scenes, and I think he enjoyed it. He saw a bit of, spend time with the S&C guys and see what the boys doing there and what we observe and monitor, and then obviously spend time with the coaches, and then even up to CEO level, just to have a glimpse of what it takes to run the Bulls on a weekly basis. So, but yeah, it was really a pleasure to have him, and he didn't intrude at all.
Johan, 3 or 4 months ago, if we told you that you'd be in this position, and Harry made the forecast, I'll get to that just now, but you're on track for a top 4 position, a home quarterfinal, would you have expected that? Would you have welcomed it? What's happening at the moment?
Yes, Emvia, it doesn't feel like it. I must be honest. And I will be honest. The pressure is still heavily on us. There's not a lot of room for error. Those last 4 games, we know the importance of this. It was a tough start, and numerous reasons it was a tough start, and now we've. I don't want to say we've turned the corner. There's you look at the weekend in Glasgow. That's where we want to compete. We want to beat those top sides, and for us to do that, there's still a lot of work. But if we can just get ourselves an opportunity to get in that playoffs, and we're not there yet. There's a lot of teams fighting for those positions still. So it is a positive that our destiny is in our own hands, but it's definitely still not the end product that we want.
Johan, our friend Tim Cocker and I were talking recently about change and the 4 South African teams and what we saw, and one observation he had about the Bulls, and it's something I've had too, is you had to pull off kind of a magic trick, keep the Bulls DNA, the actual the Bulls DNA that's in you, and then also bring in this sort of Uster type incisive spearhead attack, Hans, keep the ball alive, and get the forwards into it too, because now the forwards are rumbling with offloads and on your shoulder kind of stuff. I imagine that took a bit of planning and thinking and trust. You had to get people to persuade them that they could do this.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously we've got a big pack, and if they're on fire, we want to keep that. We've seen it at international level. We've seen it at all levels. The kicking game will always be a factor, the aerial game. So that is almost stock and standard, your forwards dominating set piece and playing well, winning the advantage line. And then you've got your backs that has to win the aerial and the kicking game. But, we in this process of changing the culture and changing the almost want to say it, the belief and a little bit of mix our styles and get the balance right. And we're probably only 3 months in the line. Like if when Neil started in January, we're only in April now. And credit to him, he came in and he shared his vision with everybody, and it obviously it's it's not an easy change. Every department is not always an easy change because you've got players that's been used to play a certain way for not 1 year, but for a numerous years. And to change that, it takes time and belief and so on. So we're going to make mistakes. That's the reality, and that's the challenge for us at the Bulls because the team has been so successful. If you don't win, it's been seen as a failure. But ultimately, if we can change the culture behind the scenes, how we train, how we live as a team, and we can change our ways on the field. And I'm sure that hopefully, if I do get the time in the next year or two, we'll see the change happening on both sides, and that's the challenge for us. Quality on paper is great to have, but it's still any change will always take time, and that's what we are going through at the moment.
No, it's very exciting. And you've got to score points nowadays. The way rugby is being refereed, the shape of it, and it's only going to get more that way. Yes, it's true. Glasgow and Stormers, top of the log, are good at stopping people, but you've got to score to get to the final, to really get there and win. There's only a few points in rugby where you can change some of that mindset, so the kick return, how many times do I run it back versus kick? Do I play from my own half? And then finally, offloading. Some coaches are famous. Joe Schmidt was like, you are not allowed to offload, person A, B, and C. I only want D, E, and F offloading. Other people like Steve Hansen was, you must see in the eyes before I offload. You must see the offload. You don't just, Sonny Bill Williams is the only guy who can break the rule. How do you organize that? I mean, obviously the Bulls are offloading more. They're keeping the ball more alive. They're scoring a ton of tries. How do you organize that and don't create too many errors for the opposition to feed from?
Yeah, I think it starts with habits. We got certain principles, and Emir will know when I think we discussed it when he was there that week. Anything in rugby is based on principles. Even the most simple principle of going forward, where rugby starts. So you go forward, and then if you want to offload, there's certain principles. You have to be in control of the ball. You have to dominate the contact. You have to, have eyesight and all those little things. But there is, like you say, the X factor, the world-class players that can throw a no-look offload pass, and if it comes off, it comes off, and everybody is smiling. But in the basic layman's terms, every player can offload as long as he follows certain principles, and that you can only create if they start doing it in training more and more, where maybe they've been. Let's say there was a prop that has been told for 4 years, you don't offload. Then if you sell now play an offload game, he's not going to do it maybe 100% unless he starts doing it in training. And then, then maybe he gets one right in the game, then he builds his confidence. If he gets it wrong, obviously that it can take him a bit longer. But that's why. So the offloading game, the running of the ball, it does take a change of mindset, but you have to train it. And unfortunately, like Dave Rennie, that's just been appointed as the All Blacks coach now. I've got highly respect for him, and we always had a bit of a good relationship. And in 2014, when we got back into Super Rugby with the Lions, myself and Swayze, we took a hammering from them in Hamilton, and we were standing on the field and talking to him, and that was almost basically the start of everything at the Lions, from a confirmation that we're on the right track, because we wanted to play an exciting brand of rugby, and here they won the Super Rugby, and they had special players to us that you have to, if you want to play a certain style, you have to give the players the freedom and the decision making to do that. But it's our job as coaches to create that environment and to make them, practice that skill over and over and over. And that's why we persisted that year. We run a little bit more, we kicked a little bit less. Then we turned it back a little bit in 2015, and we moved up on the ladder. And then 2016, we still scored the most tries, but we still played in the final. And 2017, so the players made better decisions when to offload, when to run, when not to run. There was, again, principles in place. How do you balance that between the running out of your half but kicking? And that's why you look at where Dave Rennie went. It always took him a year and 2 years, and then his team started to win. So I feel Australia was just just too soon to pull the trigger. And now he joined Kobe, I think, last year. And now they're almost top of the lock in the Japan League, against quality sides. And that's why I think, I know there's a question around the All Blacks, let's say personnel. Do they got the big tight five? But I think Dave Renier is a very good choice, because it will take him a year. And I'm not saying that, I'm going to get everything right, but it does take time. And to come back to your question, that's where we have to be. It's that mix. We haven't got the patience, because the Bull supporters see 4 finals and they want to get back in the finals, and I understand it completely. But if we want to going to change our culture, and we're going to change a bit of our DNA, it's just going to take time.
Take a step back to go forward sometimes is part of life. I was actually thinking about the Bulls can play through a team now as well as around, and that's what Dave Rennie's teams can do. And I think maybe on reflection that your Lions were similar. I think the player that was always undercovered in your Lions was Ross Cronje, where he was so quick from ruck to ruck that it was almost unbelievable, like Jameson Gibson Park for Ireland. Not necessarily the quickest guy, the fastest guy in the team, but quick from ruck to ruck. And then the ball was available for Elton to pull the trigger. And when I look now at the Bulls, I think early season, you were quick to ruck, but the ball, it was unsure what to do next. And now it looks like everyone's on the same page. So Papita's having a barnstorming season. He's not just quick from ruck to ruck. He is quick. But then the players at midfield have to know what to do, Harold and the guys. Is that part of what you had to sort of get people around to get used to the idea? We're playing much quicker now from ruck to ruck.
Yeah, and we're not there yet, to be honest. There's times that there's times if you look at the Stormers specifically, and then even the weeks after Cardiff and even Munster, the first off, we should have put those teams away. We had a lot of opportunities where we just made errors, knocked balls, or didn't play as quick as we wanted to. So that's why, Harry, we're far from getting it right yet. And you're never going to have probably the whole 80 minutes perfectly, and the last thing I can judge a play on is on a mistake, because that's part of rugby. But as long as the effort is there and the heart, and we see a lot of that now, we must just bring that execution with, like you mentioned, if the ball is there, to move it, and then the guys outside of that, if it's the 10, if it's the 12, those guys making good decisions, and not a bad pass or a drop ball or kick it away or whatever, there's progress. It's small steps at the moment, and like I said, but there's in the bigger picture, myself and Neil, we didn't have a preseason with this team. We're probably going to get there later on about the challenge that I see Springboks coming in and out of the team, and your injured players, and you've got Currie Cup to manage and all those things. So we in Super Rugby, and I think that's where the Europe teams got a bit of an advantage above us, because yes, they got Nations and they got the end of year tour, but once the end of year tour is finished, all of August, a bit of July, August, they can give the internationals some off time, and then they can start filtering them in either before or after that November, where there's no URC games, so they don't miss out on games. And then they've already, at least the preseason, even if they don't train the whole preseason, they're involved with the strategy. They're involved with the how we're going to play, what we're going to do. And I mean, last year, I saw the Springboks only in December for the first time, and you already 3 months. That's the challenges that we'll probably get. So it is still small steps, but yeah, hopefully we'll get there.
Right, about the defense, Harry's been talking about the attack now, but on the defense, you guys have been working hard in defense. League trials at the beginning of the season, that also seems to have turned the corner a little bit. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, defense is, it's a confidence thing. It's a thing that you start building in the preseason again, and then, you start getting. I remember when I played, you start getting almost as a pack. You start getting a connection and a unity. And if it's more defense or it's a phase defense, and the same with the backs, your back three, etc. But we had obviously constant changes every week, 10, 12 changes, and a lot of changes. And you look at the tries, a lot of the tries came from either a knock-on ball, or so our transition was not good. And over the months went by, we put a lot of work on our transition D. If we do lose a ball, or our one-on-one tackles, contact point, and those things. So it's definitely an area that the players and John has to take credit. It wasn't a commitment thing. They'll say a lot of times the defense is a commitment thing. I don't think it's a commitment thing. I just think it was a system, and just our combinations. We just lacked a bit of fluency in our selection, and for whatever reason, as we mentioned now, with the team changing a lot, and that builds confidence. And once we started, you can see from January, we started a bit of getting consistency in our selection, and we got more training volume into everybody, the system, and everything started to get better. So hopefully it can even get better, because there's still a challenge with the team that we're going to play if we want to get to the playoffs.
On attack, people by the very nature of attack, they become split from each other. Obviously your quick guys on the vanguard, and your forwards are in a cleaning mode. In defense, you a lot of times you are together. You're right next to your best friend. You're next to your mate, and it's about trenches. It's about belief. It's about, I won't drop you. If I do, save me. That kind of stuff. That takes leadership. I see Canan Moodie moving around from outside center sometimes to wing. Number 13 often is an organizer. It definitely is for a lot of teams. And then in the forwards, I see a guy like Elrich Louw being very vocal in maul defense, not just swimming, by shouting and telling people where to go. Because, it's not obvious on TV. Everything's obvious where space is on defense and where the holes are. But on the field, it's hard to see what's what. Are you happy with some of the young guys stepping up and being leaders?
Yeah, no, definitely. We've got a defensive leader group, and obviously those guys you've mentioned is on them. So good spot with Elrich and Canan on the defensive group, leader group, and so it is definitely, like you say, it's about communication, and it's about trust the guys next to you, and that's where Canan is quite a big important part for us, especially when he plays 13. But now Sebastian showed that he can play 13 as well for us, and then obviously he got injured, and so that's the challenge for us. Now we've got another challenge maybe this coming weeks with Cheswell. Has got a little bit of an injury after our last game, as well as Kirkley. So now we must see where we're going to use Canan, and we know how effectively he is. So that's the challenges we've got, with injuries coming in and out, and then you move a player because he's world class into a certain position. I think Canan is still one of the best wingers, even, but his strength is defensively as a 13. But if you play a Stedman there, or you play a David Creel there, then obviously that mantle falls on them, and then that's when to come back to your point, Harry, that's when you trust that those players will take up that leadership role, and that talk, that is important, and we're fortunate that Cheswell is very quiet. That Cheswell is still learning his trade, and the players around him is really helping him a lot. And as an individual, he's good defensively, but in the system, they're helping him a lot, and that's what we expect from our senior players, to help the younger guys.
All right, you mentioned that you had to change the culture, and I'm wondering what culture and why. Why was it necessary to change the culture?
I think it's success is unfortunately brings a bit of almost what's the mindset that the English word is almost entitled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, complacency and entitlement, and you feel like you'll just have to run out on the field, and it happens. And what do you stand for? Who are you as a person if you're not on a rugby field? And for me, that's an important part, your identity and your culture as a human being. And the Bulls, and I say it with, I'm sure all the other franchises, the players, everything is given to them. If it's food, it's clothing, it's the jersey, the washing, everything from a training point of view. So for me, it's opportunity to learn. That's not how life always work. If you're out of rugby, people don't always just give you things, and you have to work for things as well, and also respect things around. And I'm not saying that players don't appreciate what they've got, but it's, for me, it's just, there must be a value system. So one of the culture things is that we establish a value system that we can uphold and keep each other accountable. And then culture is also the way we train, the intensity, the speed, the fitness levels, all those things. Like I said, if you, the biggest thing is, and credit to Rassie and how he keeps the Springbok guys on their toes. And if the older guy is not performing, he's quickly to identify a young guy coming in and putting the pressure on, and that's what I say. So a culture thing for me is also that you train it and so on. But I still, and that has been there for a couple of months now, but still, I honestly don't know the players as well as I would know them in 2 years or 3 years time, and then the culture will look after itself, if that makes sense, Mbia. The respect for how we train, the stuff that we say, the intensity and everything. It's like at the Springboks now. They train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is off. If we start the same system, because we train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, if we change just that small little thing, it's going to take the guys that's not used to it a couple of weeks to adapt, their bodies to adapt, and physically to be able, mentally and physically, to be able to go 3 days in a row. And that's what I say. So a culture, it doesn't matter either how I coach, how Neil coach, how I want the guys a certain way to train, that in the gym, etc. That all takes time, and then obviously, as the team arrived at, it can't be my culture. It can't be all about me. Because the last thing, it's definitely not about me. It must be a Vodacom Bulls culture and a team culture, a team identity. And in that, you've got your individual roles, and in that, you've got your individual responsibility to uphold that culture. And that's the change that I'm after.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to get that wisdom. I lived in locker rooms most of my life, and my reflection on locker room and culture is, I like the locker rooms where you put your hand up when you made a mistake. I like the locker rooms where, even though we think 35-year-old and a 22-year-old the same generation, they're not. I like the locker rooms where a 22-year-old can also speak and he's not shouted down by the ooms. And I think finally it's about the recognition that sometimes you have to step down and let someone else take over. You're not too vingat for that. Am I in the range of what you're talking about now, about culture building, which is, every man in there is a king, every man in there, no one's, below another man, but also you have to recognize people who have innate leadership ability and humility.
100%. I can't agree more. It's the philosophy I've got is treat everybody the way you would like to be treated. And there's wisdom in a 22-year-old because he's got an other view of how he looks at life, and there's wisdom in a 35-year-old guy who's been around the block. Some of them are fathers and husbands, others are still, learning who they are as men. So for me, I definitely love the culture of everybody has got a voice. And there's obviously a respect factor, like always when you're 22 years old and you're standing next to a guy who's won 2 World Cups or won a World Cup, you'll always have respect for him. That's just who we are as rugby players. We respect people that achieved a lot. But if you've got a good idea, it's a big thing. It's a thing that, again, I don't want to talk about it, but it's in our values at the moment. There's we there. Everybody is at the same level, and it's a big thing that we created is ask questions. Don't be afraid at the Lions as well, and this is the same thing. Ask questions. There's no such thing. A Ruan Combrink could put his hand up as a youngster, but an old guy can also. And I like what you said. To take ownership of your mistake. I like a culture where I knocked the ball, put up my hand. Sorry, boys, but I knocked the ball. Then everybody know that you've made the mistake. You're aware of the mistake, but now we're going to back you up. If we have to scrum now and defend, that's it. That's part of the culture. Now we stay and fight for each other. And the same with a try. If the winger scored a try, I feel everybody can celebrate it, because the reality is it started up front maybe, and there was good passing in between, and then the winger scored a try. So it's just that recognition of everybody, and then naturally you've got your leaders that just last year when I was fortunate to be at the junior box, when I walked into the junior box for the first time in the camp, Riley Norton he just stands out as a leader, and that's the reality. Some players is just born leaders, and they will speak a bit more, and they will speak maybe with a bit more with authority, because it's just the way that I can remember the first time I played under Frans Pienaar as the Springbok captain, and I stand in a team talk where he talks, he was exceptional, and same with John Smith. It's as if they can say the right things at the right time. They've always got, it's almost as if they prepare always something, and that's how comfortable they are. So you're always going to get those outstanding leaders. But ultimately actions drives culture. Like if you run in the front, then you can challenge the guys to work hard, but if you're running away at the back, you're probably going to stay quiet. So there's certain norms that you can show through your actions instead of words, and then you also become a leader.
And as usual, I forgot to ask you to subscribe to this channel. Make sure you like it, make sure you subscribe to it so you get notifications. And also, if you're interested in something a bit deeper, something more behind the scenes, go visit our website, megafoonrugby.com. Sign up there, and also make sure that you sign up to be invited to our get-togethers during the All Blacks Greatest Rivalry Tour. It's not only going to be Harry, Paul Avenant, Tim Cocker of X-Jokes, but also Martin Devlin. So a lot to look forward to. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you become a member of the website, so we can notify you when we have more details. And without any further ado, let's get back to the interview. I was speaking to someone the other day, and we realized we forgot about this. When you took over with the Lions, the situation was quite dire. John Mitchell was locked out of the change room. The players were extremely unhappy, and you managed to turn that around. So, and you're a people's person, and you have a lot of experience with that. What did you find at the Bulls when you walked in? I don't want you to go into details. It's not what I'm asking, but just what struck you when you walked into the Bulls that you needed to address? Firstly, the very first thing that you thought you had to change, and take into account pretty much a similar thing happened at the Lions, what happened at the Bulls, a bit of a player unrest, call it that.
I think the first thing for me was, for the players to earn their trust, for them to understand that, I've obviously going to have a different way of coaching and philosophy and style and everything mixed into that, and that they must know that for me it's about the player. For me it's about, yes, I'm going to make tough calls, and sometimes you're going to agree, and I'm going to select you and not select you, or I'm going to tell you to do something that you think you do well, but I want you to to work on that. So you're not always going to agree with players, but I want them to understand that they honestly, I told the teams that I see them as my sons, and not to say I'm going to be, never be disciplined them or never be hard on them. But the reality is I want them to understand that, I know I work with people, and I know I work with people's careers, and, and every decision you make influence them as people. So that was the first thing that for me, them to understand, let's get a understanding of who I am and who they are and where we want to go as a team from a rugby point of view, what kind of style and philosophy we want to play. But my background is you have to earn the jersey, you have to work hard, and you have to earn that respect through how you train and how you play for me to trust you again, you know. So I'll give you and I'll help you and I'll support you where I can. If it's family stuff, if it's off the field stuff, but then in return, you know, there must be almost a honest conversations where we're going to work hard and so on. So yeah, so that was probably the biggest thing that I've, you know, they must understand. It's a new start for both of us.
So then you went and you started had a bit of a stuttering start, and then went on a losing game streak, and you know that would have tested that trust that you were trying to build with the players. So how did you overcome that? Because they might have been thinking, yeah, the new coach, he said this, but it's not working. And how did you manage to keep the faith? You know, keep them on board and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I think sometimes, you know, people want to almost, you know, I don't know what's the right word, you know, see if you're going to change if things doesn't go the way, you know, your way, if you're going to still now suddenly start treating them differently and, you know, don't show them respect and start blaming and all those things. And, you know, for me, again, you know, the game we're in, your joy and your happiness can't come from just results, you know. Otherwise, the one week you will be friendly, and the next week you won't talk to anybody, you know. And I think we all in has been experienced enough in life that you know, there is tough times that you have to go through, and the only way you can deal with it if you stand together with each other. And I think that's what we were, you know, honestly could only do, is every Monday come in and reset and keep working on the things that we wanted to do and fix. And I just knew that somewhere it will change. You know, it doesn't matter if it was me changing maybe one or two things off the field or whatever. It doesn't matter. The reality is, you know, hopefully the players would have seen that the results is one thing, but it's how we keep treating each other to change and to get that belief.
Johan, you know, we all want to know what our dads do and what it is, you know. And I was a kid, as a lighty, and my dad was a nuclear scientist, both in New York and in South Africa. And I would ask him a question about it. And of course, to make it make sense to me, he would give a very simplistic answer. But in the end, when I was a bit older, I really pushed him, and I wanted to know what this nuclear science was all about. And he would say, "Nah, I just manage people, son. That's all I do. And I manage people." Like, he wouldn't give me the technical stuff, because why would he? First of all, and second, he was right. When you become the head, you manage people. You know, do you know that, you know, does Mike Blair, who's about to become a coach at the All Blacks, what he said is, I got tired of being the head coach because I couldn't get into the weeds, and I want to be in the weeds and attack. You came up obviously learning your craft as a forwards coach and then attack orientated, but at some point you're the head coach. And so when people say, "Oh, he's not technical, he doesn't do this," the truth is, you're supposed to be doing what you're doing above the fray, and you've got to like hear ideas from different people and put it to practice. What do you say to people who say that? Because that's one of the knocks on people like Dobbo or you is, they're not technical enough. I mean, you're a head coach. You're supposed to be managing people, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that is our biggest challenge, to be fair. You know, it takes most of your time to manage people. You know, I'm not talking about just the players. I'm talking about the medical staff, the S&C staff, the marketing staff, the top board, you know. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, you know, that you have to manage, and you've got recruitment going on, and you know, there's so many things that you have to manage. And but then ultimately the players is your asset, the players that have to play on a Saturday. So you have to manage them and prepare them for the game. Then you've got your players that are not playing but are training against you. And they wanna understand where they are. And sometimes you get the players that agree with you, and sometimes you don't, because you know, obviously there's disappointment when you selected the team. And then you get your players even outside the training squad. So for example, maybe there's a few players now that we don't have with us on tour, or even before we went on tour, they're not in the training 32 players. They maybe go play for the Franchise Cup, the under 23 side, you know. And yet, you know, they quality players that you have to say, for the sake of our training quality, if we've got 45 players training, your intensity drop of your training. And that's why now you have to manage them. And, we all, I'm sure everybody is aware of what Wilco went through
Mm.
the last couple of weeks, when he got the news about his dad, and the fight with the cancer, and obviously his dad passed away now last week. So we're working with human beings, that you have to manage, and people will say, well, he should have played and whatever, but that's not who we are. For me, there's a human factor, and there's a lot of things. So yeah, so it's definitely that, and then I learned so lot from players, from other coaches, talking to other coaches. And that's an ongoing thing. But I do know a little bit about rugby, and not too much, a little bit. But I would say, it's not like I only manage people and I don't know anything about rugby. But I suppose there is the people who would say, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's fair. That's their opinion. But yeah, and maybe it doesn't look like it at the moment, but it's fine. Hopefully, we can get it right, eh?
Yeah, as my dad would have put it, I did have to know all the terms and terminology and jargon, and I have to recognize good ideas from bad ideas. But it wasn't his job to come up with the ideas at some point. One big point you have to make is how your loose trio is going to play and how your midfield is going to play in rugby, and particularly in this kind of tournament. Do I want my centers to get over the ball? Do I want them to barge at the ruck? Do I want them to get around and counter ruck even? And the problem is, if people aren't good at that, it can really blow against you. It looks to me that you're getting your midfield more active beyond the ball, on the floor, and fighting and contesting for that. Even wings, I think Seb is good at that too. Am I right? Is that something that you're trying to bring to the game now? Is have more contests everywhere on defense?
Yes and no, Harry, because at one stage, coming back to when we leaked a lot of tries, we actually had too many guys going for lost causes. So there's guys, almost every second guy went for a turnover, but he's not in a good position. He's just, he's basically just wasting himself at the ruck, and then you lose 3-4 players in one breakdown. You got the tackler and the tackler assist and another guy, or sometimes even two guys who think they can get to the ball. So again, in layman's terms, if you're a good jackler and that's your strength, if you're a Malcolm Marx, or we're not going to take it away from you. But if you're not good at it, but you may be good as a tackler assist to have a good tackle fight, maybe that's your focus point. Get buy us another 3 seconds by having a great tackle fight, and so the defense can get into position. So just play to your strengths. So at the moment we've got designated guys that do, if that's their strengths, if they've got license to go, they can go. But other guys just focus on their tackles, and like you say, midfielders is probably one of them. If you've got an Andre Esterhuizen, you're probably going to let him attack the breakdown, because if he's not in getting his hands on the ball, he's big enough to counter-ruck. So again, it's about what is your strengths as a player. It's like I spoke earlier about, go forward is one of the basic principles in rugby. So some guys use their feet, other guys use their brute strength, other guys use a handoff. Kwagga, he hit and spin when he joined us at the Lions as a smaller guy. Now he's so strong he can run over guys, but he had his other strength was to leave the ball on the ground and stand up and go again. So how you create that momentum, play to your strengths, and that's why I say so. So it is something we working on, but it's not something specifically. We would rather want to more put it on the player himself and what is his strengths, and then utilize that.
I wanted to ask you something that I noticed very clearly is how well you and Neil de Bruin and John work together. But Neil is such a big part of that coaching side now. How much did it hold you back not having someone like Neil there right from the start? And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here. I'm just trying to understand the challenges that you faced.
Yeah, I think MV, again, there's no doubt, and I know everybody will know that we're talking about Chris and so on. He's a great person, and he's technically one of so good coaches, one of the best coaches, and he understands the game. But as in life, sometimes for some reason, myself and let's say Kreiner Otto was very good mates off the field. Myself and Hannes Strydom was good, but not as good as myself and Kreiner, Or so what I'm saying is it's just sometimes we see things and we understand things, but you just gel with somebody. And I was fortunate to obviously met Neil through Swys when he joined us at the Lions as the skills coach, and then when he came over to Japan with me, and he's a copy and paste from Swys, and Swys gives me energy, and he's innovative, and he thinks about the game, and Neil is the same, and we just enjoy each other's way of thinking about the game, and we're both willing to take risk when need to and live by the result if it doesn't work. And that's the nice thing about it. So it's about maybe personalities, I don't know what you call it, maybe thinking about certain things, risk taking or whatever. And it's just the fact that that you look at Dave Rennie. I think he's an example I want to use again. I think he went to Glasgow, and that's where what's the name? His attack coach was. Now he's with him at Kobe, and now he's with him at the All Blacks. It's just sometimes things just happen that you feel a little bit more comfortable with somebody, and it just helps you as a person, because like I just said, there's a lot of pressure in this game. Every day there's pressure, and sometimes you just need somebody that is around you that reminds you about certain things in life, and bring that enjoyment back, and Neil is one of those people.
Talking about coaches, the big uproar at the end of the last year when you what the right term to use here is, but when the Springboks had a bit of a look at your plan and everything else, and I spoke to you at Loftus when I was visiting there, and you made it quite clear that it was a storm in a teacup. Tell us about that, what the thinking was behind it, what you got out of it, and what it means for the Springboks to be involved in a franchise league, because the Bulls are not the only team that they're helping out at any given stage or giving advice to or having a look at.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to sound sour grapes and upset people, but the reality is, MBA, is that when we went through that bad spell of losing games, you constantly, you're obviously going to start questioning, are you on the right track? Because remember, a team has got a certain profile, and sometimes you want to force a certain style or profile on them, but it doesn't fit them. They either not, let's say the forwards is not fast enough, or the centers can't distribute, or whatever your reason is. If you look at a team, and now it's like us telling Australia, maybe, I don't know, going forward, but in the past you have to maul and bully the Springboks. They're not going to do that. So the reality is, we went through this tough time, and then I thought by myself, what do I miss, and what if I speak to Rassie and see if they can send, maybe, because the obvious reason was that we leaked tries. I mean, we conceding points, so let's start there. What do they see from the outside? And I spoke to Rassie, and Rassie said, listen, Jerry is unfortunately in Ireland, but Felix knows everything about every department, from attack, defense, kicking, etc. Why don't you speak to Felix and see what he can see? And then I spoke to Felix, and then obviously Felix said that he would love to come up, and Dwayne, because obviously Dwayne is also up to speed with especially the contact areas. And I said, that's great, let's do that, and then see if they can sit with John and just reassess everything. Like, this is what we do from lineouts, this is what we do from scrums, this is our general philosophy. And I mean, they made it quite clear they're not going to come and coach. They're going to come and speak to John specifically, look through things with him. Then we'll maybe observe a training and see what they see. And then obviously they won't do it with any local games, because it's just not the right timing. So then the whole thing came out somehow the week before the Stormers, and I think that was the big big hoo-ha, because I mean, in the meantime, they were at the Sharks, they were at the Lions before that, and nobody made an issue about it. But it's because we were obviously back against the wall, and the thing came out that it's the week before the Stormers, and ultimately Felix did come and he did sit with John, and to be honest, and I'm sure Felix won't mind me mentioning it, that he was everything we did was basically 100% like it was just the small little things that we focus on in that systems that we had to adjust. It wasn't like suddenly everything was wrong and now you have to redo this and get a new plan and so on. And then the same, Jerry joined us when we were overseas just before I think we played Edinburgh or Po or somewhere, and again, his time was more off the field at the hotel with sitting with us as coaches there, and especially with John, than coaching on the field. And that's a great thing. It does show the players that we care. It does show that there's players that can learn from the stuff that they hear. And then ultimately, Rassie was there the week on the Friday on captains before we played Cardiff. He just did a visit to all the unions. So he was on the Thursday with the Lions, and he was on the Friday with us, and nobody knows about it. I'm obviously telling it now, and now a lot of people is going to know about it. But he came informal, had first of all discussion with myself and Edgar about Springbok rugby and the plans for going forward for this year and next year. And then obviously he said he wants to just talk to a few of our players after training, and that's the reality. There must be a relationship between South African franchises and Springbok rugby, because ultimately I know it's tough for me as a coach, but my goal always, even when I started at the Lions, was to see how many guys we can produce for South African rugby. That's my goal, is to say to a player that, yes, if I've got the privilege to be a small part, just a small little part, a tiny part of his career, helping him to get to the Springboks, that for me is so valuable. So obviously, we do it in conjunction to get the best for us as a team, but also for the players to go to Rassie, and therefore that was the part that frustrated me, that if I can call it, the media and the people made so big, who are now the Springboks is coaching the Bulls, and now the Springboks is helping the Bulls, but that was definitely not the case. They weren't hands-on coaching and grabbing in because there's a crisis. It was just a reaching out to a player, a person that you played with and got a lot of respect from a coaching point of view, just to get another observation.
Johan, one of the things I've been able to derive from my discussions and really good conversations on the spectrum here with top coaches, Dabo, but also guys like Rassie, Joe, Contepomi, Michael Checker. What I've got from them, all of them, is how difficult it is to carve out time as a head coach in the middle of a season to think, to refresh, to ponder. It just coming at you, all the different directions, doing a pod like this, it's just taking up your time. And it's really important to know what to do with kick space now that there's no shepherds and guards. It's important to think about macro issues like, should we be more this or that, that kind of stuff, the big picture. But also, like even a guy like Jake White was telling me, just getting influences from other sports and having time to look at tennis or something and get a different idea. How do you do that in a day? A day in the life of Johan, how does it work that you carve out enough time to be alone and think and look at the sky and think about something else?
It is difficult, I must be honest, Harry. I don't think I do enough of that, to be fair. I think, we tend to be so indulged in rugby that you only look at rugby. I watch about every game over a weekend, and you see if there's stuff that you can pick up, things that the teams are doing differently that you can maybe adjust. And then you obviously got a lot of discussions with your coaches, your internal coaches, your junior coaches, see what they see from the outside. But I don't think or personally, I don't think, you see a lot from rugby league and you see a lot from other sports, but I don't think we get enough information from them and talk, and to them, and even going abroad, when you got time, because the challenge is when the season finishes, you only got like 5 weeks off. And now if you take 2 or 3 of those weeks to go and let's say spend time in America or spend time in the UK or whatever, it means you leave yourself only 2 weeks of planning your preseason and spending time at home and get away from the game, because that's the biggest challenge. There's so much occupying you as a head coach off the field. There's constantly things that takes your time off the field, that if you don't force yourself to take a time away from the game, you'll constantly be involved with something around the game. So and that's why I think it's so good if you can do that. So for me personally, obviously I love home. I love to be at home and just spend time there, and then obviously my faith is important, and that's where I get my recharge and my belief in my faith in Jesus Christ, and he gives me that almost balance of what life is all about. So so that's probably calibrating me that rugby is one thing. It is a tough place to be, but it's not the everything in life.
Harry talked about, Harry did some calculations there. We talked about it earlier. Let's just end off here, because we'll keep you here for another 2 hours if you don't stop us. About the running to the quarterfinals. Harry, just talk to us about that, the sums that you did and how you see the top 8 shaking out.
Well, I mean, this is all, in a laboratory almost, but the Bulls have, you have your destiny in your hands. I think that's the right way to put it. If you take care of your business, you do your job, there's 18 to 20 points on offer. That puts you in the top 4. That's a very big thing in any kind of playoff system, is to be, on the right side of the ledger. And part of that is just weighing. I just took everyone's final schedule, Stormers, Glasgow, Bulls, etc., Munster, Ulster, and right now the opponents you have, what points they have right now. So just an indicator of where they are, and then the home and away problem. It looks good. It looks like something, if you had to compare your schedule with others, you'd say, I take mine, Is that how you see it? Is that a dangerous way to look at it? Or is that almost like giving confidence to your players? Like, hey, take care of business and we're there.
You see, Harry, now the right question or the right answer is, I think everybody knows the importance of this next games now that we're out of Europe. The reality is it can go, one way or the other way. If you don't get the results, there's obviously dangers of missing out on the playoffs. That will be catastrophic. So the first thing is to win them, and get the wins and stay, like you say, destiny in your own hands.
So do you treat them like knockouts from now? Is it just all knockouts?
Definitely. I think the reality is we have to treat the Dragons first, because one, they pushed the Stormers, they pushed the Lions, and then they went and beat Stade Francais on the weekend, and now they're in a quarterfinal of the European. So that shows you they're not a bad team. They're not a team that you just get on the field and take your 5 points and go. They're a good team. We actually sat this morning and put our plan in place of how we want to play against them. And if you go through their stats, there's a lot of good things they do, and they are a challenging side. When we spoke about the breakdown, they contest the breakdowns, they stop the mauls well, they kick well. There's a lot of good things they do. So that's why, we need to be at our best, and we can't underestimate where they lie on the log. And then you move on to the Scarlets, and then obviously the Italian games back at Loftus. So the reality is, yes, potentially, I think the Stormers game, to reflect back on the Stormers game, hurt us a bit because it was a home game, and it could have gave us a little bit of a buffer and almost keep, maybe be more realistic of having that third spot. because now we're relying on getting bonus points, getting maybe 20, 5, 5, 5, 5, or at least 2 5s. And that's the thing. The first thing for us is just getting the wins, first of all, is to play accurate rugby and instead of almost, high risk rugby, because you need that bonus point. So again, the reality is Glasgow, Leinster, those teams will be up there, and if you want to win this competition, you have to go and win them away from home. That's the reality, and I think that's what we say is keep our destiny in our own hands by winning the games ahead. How we win them, hopefully we do get those bonus points, and we do at least gives us a position of playing one game at home. But if I think from semi-finals or even finals, you're probably going to have to play away, and that's out of your hands. So just focus on the next job.
One thing I did notice, again, like I said, the good relationship you guys have with each other at the team, and that you're a happy team. I wanted to make that quite clear, yes, yeah, and that was a pleasure again to see that for myself and rub it in Harry's face how much better the Bulls are actually than the Stormers.
Now we must get Harry to Pretoria.
There you go.
You know what, Johan? We actually spoke about that. We were wondering how much I saw at the Bulls because of who I am and what I wanted to see. We were wondering what it would be like if Harry was at the Bulls, what he would have seen.
We have to sign a non-disclosure document before we get
yeah. I agree.
I had to sign the same thing at the Stormers as well.
You see, we didn't even make him.
I didn't sign anything.
That's our trust.
All right, Johan. Thanks, man, so much. It's such a pleasure. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot.
And hopefully, if we have another one, it's been a good season.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.